So, I don't know if you guys know, but just the other day, a clown and a slowpoke had a debate about abortion. The slowpoke was pro life, and the clown was pro death. Let's see what they had to say and chime in here and there.
Holes in my position on abortion. For those of you who don't know, I am pro-choice. I think abortion is perfect.
Pro-choice, huh? The whole thing about women having the right to her body. Fair enough. Will that hold true when mandatory vaccines come around? Will that still hold true? Something tells me, once again, Richard would prove to be a big, fat hypocrite.
Morally acceptable. I'd say up until 6 months into the pregnancy. After that, if a woman wants to have an abortion or just doesn't want the child, I think pregnancy should just be induced. So the reason I believe this is because I don't think the child develops or just doesn't want the child. I think pregnancy should just be induced. For those of you who don't know, I am pro-choice. I think abortion is perfectly morally acceptable. I'd say up until 6 months into the pregnancy. After that, if a woman wants to have an abortion or just doesn't want the child, I think pregnancy should just be induced.
Wow. So he believes in abortion up until day of birth, basically. That's what he believes is like how can you be vegan? Right? How dare you tell people to be vegan? That it's a moral responsibility. He believes, look, first and foremost, according to people a lot smarter than Gaines, sentience begins maybe a couple months into pregnancy, perhaps, right? But no, he knows better. That's 6 months because he says so, right? And then even though the child is sentient, he thinks it's okay to murder it anyway. But don't you dare eat eggs or, mollusks or whatever other non-sentient sea creatures, as I've heard him say in other debates, because, he extends the right to life to these non-sentient creatures because, well, we can't be sure if they are or aren't sentient. So just to be on the safe side, you can't eat any of those things, right? But you could murder and eat a sentient human fetus. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, how are people like this even allowed to live? How? I don't understand.
So the reason I believe this is because I don't think the child develops sentience to the level that we'd really care about until about 6 months.
Right, to the level that we really care about. Completely and utterly arbitrary and subjective. What if somebody else cares about a different level of sentience? You just debunked yourself. Like, who cares, right? It's all subjective. This is the problem with moral subjectivists. It's all subjective. So what are you doing even debating ethics, morals? Like, you really have to be a moron, a clown, to even do that when everything is okay because I say it is, because you say it is. Whatever you say is okay is okay. Whatever I say is okay is okay. So why are you even having a debate? Like, this is... I don't know what this guy's IQ is, but wow.
It takes around that much time for the cerebral cortex and the thalamus to develop into like the early beginnings of like conscious experience.
Science! I am so scientific. I'm gonna throw some big words around because science and I'm scientific.
Like, get that. Come on.
Where they can even feel anything. There's also a real lack of electrical activity in the brain.
Blah, blah,
like,
blah,
even at 6 months.
blah.
So it's really hard to exactly pinpoint down when sentience develops in a fetus. But I'd say roughly around 6 months is when you can safely say sentience exists.
Right, so when these geeks name the trait, it's sentience, right? But somehow all of a sudden that doesn't apply to a human being. What kind of sense does that make? So you can't kill a... eat any animal because they're sentient, but you can kill and eat a sentient human being. Like what? You can't even kill and eat non-sentient animals because sentient. Because I think it might be sentient. It's possible that in a fantasy world, this animal could be sentient, right? But it's perfectly okay to kill and eat a sentient human being. Like, why do people watch this guy? Even if you're a vegan and you believe in veganism for whatever weird reason, like, why do you even waste time on this maggot? Let's just call him what he is. He's a maggot.
So I don't think it's morally unacceptable to terminate a non-sentient being. Wouldn't consider that murder. I'd also say an unborn fetus isn't worth nearly as much as a fully formed human.
Right, but even after 6 months, it's okay to induce pregnancy. So murder a sentient human being. And by 6 months, most people who know a thing or two about this would say that the fetus is sentient anyway. Way before that. But he won't even extend the sort of courtesy, if you will, to a human being that he will to a sea creature. There's no proof is even sentient.
So again, that plays into the
No evidence.
moral equation. I'd also say that the bodily autonomy of the female takes precedent before the life of a fetus. And I'd also say, just for public health concerns, people should just have access to safe abortions.
But gee, what about the bodily autonomy of the fetus, right? Of the. This is like the idiocy of someone like Vegan Gains. They treat another human being inside of a mother, as some kind of an appendage or an organ when it's another human being.
So, why don't we start the discussion off there? What are your issues with?
Hey guys, thanks for having me
You're a retard?
on, man. When it threatens a life, horrible, and there's no point of them living anyway.
Okay, what about rape?
Oh yeah, I was gonna mention rape. Yeah.
So you're fine with abortions in
No.
circumstances of rape?
Now, you could sit there and discuss like these extreme cases, that's fine, but none of that addresses the inherent right or the lack of any inherent right to live of the fetus, if that's what you believe, right? It completely misses the point of the debate. Like, does the fetus have the right to live? Period. Inherently or not. Who cares about these extreme cases? It makes no sense.
No, I was listing the cases where I would be okay with abortion. So
Okay.
yeah, so the health issues.
Okay, so
rape.
if it puts the mother at risk, or if the child is at risk for living some sort of horrible life, like if it has some sort of horrible disfigurement or something.
Yeah, or if it's gonna die, or
Sure.
yeah, so those and rape. So
Okay, so you would be fine with abortions if the mother was raped.
yeah,
Okay.
as well as the health issues and the threatening the life of the mother.
Again, none of that addresses whether or not the fetus is a human being and or sentient and or has the right to live. None of that. Like, is this a principled discussion, or are we just gonna blather about stuff that doesn't make any sense and is irrelevant, right? Like, seriously, neither one of these guys is very bright.
Just dying from the pregnancy. That's also, you can abort the baby then too. So yeah, so what's left is really just convenience and not wanting to have a child. And I don't think that the convenience of the parents trumps human life itself. I think that human life
Okay.
itself is more valuable than that.
Okay, so tell me precisely why you're wrong with giving, like, an abortion being performed just due to convenience. Like, what's the ultimate reason? What's wrong with it?
Well, the ultimate reason is, in my moral system, human life it's more precious, and it should carry more weight, and it should be considered more than simply just having convenience and bodily autonomy, as you like to say. I think that we ought to focus more on human life.
Okay, sure. Do you think being raped and being forcibly impregnated is inconvenient?
I don't think that's inconvenient. I think that's beyond inconvenient. I think.
Well, no, that's inconvenient. That would fall under the definition of inconvenient. Define inconvenient.
This guy being alive is very inconvenient to me because I say so. So under his own moral framework, if you could even call it that, well, somebody could take him out and that would be okay because it's inconvenient. Like, what is this discussion about? Like, oh, wow. Just wow.
Convenience.
Well, inconvenience, it's you're technically right when you say it falls under the definition of it, but it would be considered an understatement. When
Obviously, that was assuming that the child has, the fetus has an inherent right to live. Whenever that right begins, whether it's at, conception or after a couple months or whenever, at any point, whatever we decide collectively that that's what that is, right? That is what it is. At whichever point that child gains this right to life because it's sentient, let's say, if that's what you believe, which is insane, right? Well, at that point, it becomes a moral, it becomes to have, it begins to have the same moral value as vegan gains, right? So if he thinks you could terminate that child after 6 months after it's sentient anyway, well, then, because it's inconvenient, then again, you could terminate vegan gains because he's inconvenient. This is his quote unquote moral framework. Like, I'm sorry, the guy's a half-wit.
you agree?
No, falls under the definition of inconvenience. Like, sure, there are worse words that you could use to describe, but I mean, I wouldn't call that a euphemism. It's inconvenient.
So it's not an understatement to call rape an inconvenience on the victim.
Look, like again, I wouldn't consider it a euphemism, but sure, like you could say it's an understatement, but that does fall under inconvenience.
What is this conversation about, seriously?
Okay, well, whether or not it's considered inconvenience or it's just beyond that, it's just I believe that when I say inconvenience, it's simply just not desiring a child once it's already growing in you, or just citing to bodily autonomy or minor sort of financial issues.
Okay, well, look, here's the issue with using the definition of inconvenience. Inconvenience is any outcome that you don't want. So, dying, the risk of dying from giving birth, that's inconvenient. You don't want to die, so dying.
No, dummy. The risk of dying is not an inconvenience. It's a risk. Dying is an inconvenience. The risk of it isn't. Going out driving, taking the risk of dying in a car accident is not an inconvenience unless you die in an accident. But, yet again, Richard proves to be a genius.
Is inconvenient. Being raped and forcibly impregnated, that's inconvenient. Having a child that has some sort of serious deformity that would, make its life horrible if it were
Yeah, I mean, it's inconvenient. It's also a heinous crime.
to be born. That's inconvenient. It's all inconvenience. That's inconvenient. Having a child that has some sort of serious deformity that would, make its life horrible if it were to be born. That's inconvenient. It's all inconvenience. So I kind of want to understand where you draw the line here because, like, basically all of these reasons, like I'd say all of these reasons are valid reasons not to take a pregnancy to term. It's just that for whatever reason you draw the line at certain things.
Where do you draw the line on inconvenience? But that's a completely subjective matter, right? Like, why is this relevant? Once again, it's just what a nonsensical conversation.
Well, yeah, the reason I draw the line at certain things is because we can all agree that there are certain things that greatly impact the quality of someone's life, whereas certain things really don't, and it's just
Okay, well,
sort
sure.
of,
Well, let me give you a hypothetical example. If
Fantasy world, right? Hypothetical. Fantasy world. It's okay for Richard to do it.
you were with a father who, got you pregnant. You're a woman, you're with a father who got you pregnant. This man is extremely abusive, he's unreliable, he's an alcoholic, he's in and out of prison. Do you think that would massively impact a child's life to the point where its life might not be worth living, potentially? There's people like Charles Manson, who grew up in a household like that. His mother was a prostitute, his father was in and out of prison, like really awful, petty criminal. He was also addicted to drugs. Look how he turned up. He's in prison for the rest of his life, he became crazy, he encouraged people to murder other people, that's how he ended up in jail. So there's a circumstance that wouldn't really fit under your definition of, like abortion being okay, but you could say that is a circumstance that would justify abortion because, again, that principle you mentioned, where it would massively impact the child's life.
Even if that's true, again, that still doesn't address the inherent right, or the lack thereof, of the fetus to live. It's just like, well, hypothetically, any life could be bad or inconvenient. That's no reason to kill a sentient human being if your trait is sentience, right? Like, it's just, I mean, I don't understand why anyone would watch this whole thing. This is just such a shit show.
So when it comes to that type of dilemma with the child having being born in that kind of unfortunate circumstance, I am in favor of what we already practice here in the West, at least, where children are taken from their parents if they're mistreating them and being irresponsible. If they're not fit to be parents, then we take them away from them.
Okay, so look, that's not always that's not always a possibility. The foster homes, they can be absolutely.
That's not always a possibility, but it's what? No, this. The thing about hypothetical, right, is that it's possible. What do you mean it's not it's always a possibility. Will it happen in every single instance? Well, probably not, but it's always a possibility. Like, he's so keen or so adamant about defining terms when he doesn't even know what the basic of terms mean. Like, sorry guys, if you're a fan of Vegan Gains, I don't know what to tell you, but the guy is an absolute idiot.
Horrible and abusive. There's plenty of stories where there are actually foster parents who would basically hoard foster children and use them for sex work. They basically get foster children from these organizations, then they would put them into sex work and use them as prostitutes and make money off of that, or make money just.
Okay, well, if that's even a legit argument for why you should murder sentient human beings, well, then there are many success stories too. So that's an argument for letting them live too, right? Shouldn't it be? Like, this guy just refutes himself. He doesn't make any sense because he's missing the point, right? Does the fetus have an inherent right to live or not? This is just.
Off of child pornography. So, look, just because there's situations where, a foster is available, that doesn't mean it's any better than living in some sort of abusive household. And there's also no way to.
Just because there are foster situations that are bad, that doesn't mean that there aren't good ones. And
even police this sort of thing. There are plenty of abusive parents who either don't know they're abusive or don't care. There aren't going to be any police or teachers or any other sort of investigators who even know about this sort of thing. So that isn't even really that's not even a measure that could prevent that sort of thing. So again, why can't people just use their own judgment? And a woman say, you know what, this circumstance isn't going to be good for my unborn child. His father is just an abusive asshole. He's probably going to abuse the child and even put me at risk. So why would it be wrong for somebody to just use their own sort of reasoning skills and intuition and get an abortion? Why should we just force this sort of moral principle on people?
Oh, really? Why should we force this sort of moral principle on people? Like, be vegan. Why should we do that? Why can't we let everybody use their best judgment, right? If I think I need meat to be healthy, well, then it's okay. This is the problem with these moral subjectivists. Everything goes, except they're authoritarians and they want you to do what they think is right, even though they say that they believe that whatever you choose to do is right. Like, this guy is just so incoherent, man. Such a huge hypocrite. Why should we impose any sort of moral principle on people? Really? And people watch this and they listen this and they can't even pick up on it and call him out on his BS. Really?
With such a broad brush, too.
Well, when it comes to that sort of dilemma, I would say that I would want there to be definitely a cracking down on such dilemmas. I would definitely want to enforce some sort of thing where we make sure that kids that are born into that circumstance
Look,
are.
This is a fantasy. This is just a fantasy world. We're
right. So when Slowpoke, the pro-life guy, somewhat pro-life, flips the script on him and presents a hypothetical, right? That's the fantasy world. But when Vegan Gains presents a hypothetical, well, that's reality. Like, who is Vegan Gains' audience? Like, the people that support him and listen to him and believe the things that he says. Like, it must be 7 to 12-year-olds or people of equivalent mental age. Like, how is this guy in any way, shape, or form credible? How? And how dumb do you have to be to think that he is?
Discussing abortion, like, you can't just say, well, in my fantasy world, like, children will never be abused. You can't just use that argument.
Right? But then he gets into a conversation about veganism and it's aliens and alien invasion and taking humanity out of a human and putting it into a cyborg and calling that human, right? But you talk about the real world and, hypothetically, the actual physical world that we live in, situations that have happened are happening, and that's the fantasy world, right? But all this nonsense about aliens and the like, that's legit? What?
Like, in the world we live in, children do get abused quite frequently, in fact.
In the world we live in, there are no aliens.
Others do end up, unfortunately, getting with guys that they shouldn't have children with, and some are smart enough to actually get an abortion and prevent some horrible things happening to themselves.
Shouldn't it be up to the woman to decide whether she shouldn't have a child with this guy? Didn't he just say that people should be able to decide? And now he's saying they shouldn't have children with... Jeez. I mean...
children. So why would you force like this moral principle on people that abortions are wrong under these circumstances, but they're okay under these circumstances? Just paint everything with an incredibly broad brush, and not people just let people use their moral agency and make their own informed decisions.
Why not let people make their own decisions, use their own moral agency, right? If morality is subjective, let people eat meat if they want to. Let them use their own moral agency. I can't take any more of this. This is just, wow. I mean, if this is the average, and I'd say he's pretty average probably, the average level of coherence of the Westerner, if this is the average level of intelligence, well, I mean, we truly are lost. And maybe this great calling should happen. This is just... This guy existing, it's an abomination. People thinking that he has any sort of credibility, it just boggles the mind how anyone could put any sort of faith in this maggot that's Vegan Gains. He will say whatever is clever. For what? For views? For money? He'll do... the guy doesn't have any values. There's not a shred of what you could call morality or ethics when it comes to this person. He doesn't have any standards. This is a completely postmodernist, brainwashed, low IQ degenerate that you're dealing with here. And that's just a fact. The guy doesn't make any sense ever. Never has, never will. He just cherry picks his debates against people who he thinks he can dominate in a conversation. People who aren't very smart themselves. And I guess to a bunch of morons, he appears somewhat intelligent. This is just... I can't, man. Not even 11 minutes in, and this guy has completely invalidated veganism, right? And has gone back on everything that he says he believes, supposedly. This guy doesn't have any value. There is no value there. But, most people, I guess, don't have any value. This is exactly the worldview that this guy projects. Like, human life doesn't have any value. I don't have any values. I'm valueless. Exterminate me. People are literally begging to be exterminated, and they don't even know it. So, it is what it is, man. Thank you for watching.